Paris is a 27-year-old Irish sports horse. Although arthritis in his hocks has been suspected, it has not yet been diagnosed. Age and a light workload without engagement of the hind end and core musculature has caused underdevelopment and muscle atrophy across Paris's shoulders, trunk and gluteal region. As you can see, Paris has adopted a camped under posture which applies his weight to the forehand. A long neck exaggerates this stance further. Thomas 2014 states that a relatively long neck will cause the horse to be overbalanced and heavy in front. During locomotion, an undertrack is created from reduced flexion in the hocks, which causes less protraction of the hind limbs. An irregular toe drag is seen, which Clayton et al. 2010 relates to weak gluteal and tarsal musculature. When ridden, Paris's back becomes tense, mainly within the thoracolumbar region. Lack of core musculature may be a contributing factor to the thoracolumbar stiffness. Dyson 2017 relates these symptoms to a low-grade bilateral hind limb lameness. In order to improve Paris's posture and muscle tone, he needs to improve his way of going. According to the German scales of training, this can be achieved through working up the pyramid. Many trainers disagree with this system or its order, such as George Morris's theory of impulsion, rhythm, contact, straightness, and then collection. However, used as a basic guide with incorporation of all the fields, these scales give a starting point. For Paris, an increase in suppleness is required. Horse and Rider in 2018 gathered information from many different riding professionals, which all agreed lateral work is a top tip to improve any horse's suppleness. Traverse, shoulders in, and leg yielding were the top 3 exercises to use. Paris has been taught leg yield previously by his owner. However, in order to incorporate all different parts of lateral work into everyday riding, shoulders in and traverse needed to be trained. Over a 3-week time period, Paris would be taught how to perform shoulder in at walk. Shoulders in is said to make the horse more supple and engaged by moving the horse onto 3 tracks at competition. The horse's outside hind limb must be on track 1, inside hind limb and outside forelimb on track 2, and then his inside forelimb on track 3, like the picture on the left. Classic shoulder in involves 4 tracks, and like the right-hand picture, each limb has its own track. By changing the horse's tracks, more weight can be carried on the inside hind limb. Grand Prix dressage rider Jody Hartstone relates this to the hind limbs working harder and gaining strength. However, Olympic dressage rider Emile Faure recommends not too much overbending of the neck or the shoulders, as that will apply too much angle and the quarters will fall out, as shown in these videos. Shoulder in will benefit Paris by working the hind end. This will reduce the hind end from showing a camped under posture and applying weight to the forehand dynamically. It will work the impulsive muscles of the hindquarters, including the biceps femoris and semitendinosus, as well as situate his weight to the hind legs. This will use the joints of the limb, as Oak 2010 recommends regular use of the joints to prevent further pain and restriction of movement in arthritic horses. Bending through the neck and back will help to relieve tension seen in the hope to provide a more supple horse with an improved way of going. McKeever 2016 found that older horses needed much less exercise in order to reach their VO2 max, and fatigue was present in lower exercise intensities. For this reason, only walk was expected of Paris during the training program. This allowed for the basic technique to be taught whilst fitness was built up, then further training in trot could be achieved. Initially, Paris's training would be performed in a grass paddock to provide more space. However, weather conditions made this unachievable. Murray et al. 2010 states that boggy and wet conditions could cause slipping or tripping, which had a risk to lameness. Therefore, a waxed sand arena was used. Dyson 2017 recommends this as the best surface to use for horses' joints. Over the 3-week training program, schooling would be performed twice a week, as Goodwin et al. 2009 states that training relies on timing and consistency. A rough outline of Paris's training program can now be seen. Positive reinforcement in the form of auditory and tactile reward was used once the desired behaviour was given, as well as negative reinforcement in the form of rein and leg pressure being removed. Although a whip was carried, a positive punishment was not used within training. Its presence was only to encourage impulsion, which Paris can lack. Wolf from Mattel 2011 suggests groundwork in a training program can benefit rider confidence, communication between horse and rider, improve obedience in hand and under saddle, providing overall physical relaxation to horse and rider. Groundwork methods were taken from Artful Riding's Celie Weston. As you can see, she is encouraging the horse to bend the neck and shoulders using the rope. The whip was not used to punish the horse, but to encourage the hind end to remain straight. These methods were adapted to better suit Paris's understanding. Celie stands to the head of the horse, however Paris's in-hand training puts the handler at the shoulder. Following BHS's policies, this method is safer for both horse and handler. However, this position did not encourage the hind end to stay straight due to Paris's unawareness of the whip's placement. Following this session, more research needed to be undertaken to evolve groundwork methods as progress could not be visually seen due to handler's placement or the video evidence, as a cranial caudal view was needed. During session 2, the camera placement was altered so that a cranial and caudal view was seen. This would show Paris's progress through the training program. It was apparent Celie West's adapted method was not fully encouraging the hindquarters to step across, keeping the straight line. Therefore, a fist was placed around the external abdominal obliques to provide a similar aid to the pressure of the leg when ridden. With the head and neck's positioning bent from the rope and cavesson, the same aids as ridden were applied. This showed better understanding and results from Paris. Praise in the form of an auditory positive reinforcement was applied, however wind and distance restricts the evidence. As you can see, Paris benefited from a circle to encourage bending of the neck and the shoulders. As the basic aids had been taught and understood by Paris, training progressed to ridden work. During session 3, a long warm-up was performed, incorporating serpentines, circles, and leg yielding. This relaxed Paris's frame and encouraged bending. Classical rider Anne Wilson recommends incorporating other movements to restore confidence when difficulties in the training program occur. Paris understood the aids asked of him, however, as a rider, common mistakes, according to Horse and Hound 2017, were made. Here, too much neck bend followed into too much angle, causing Paris's hind to move in off the track. In this video, you can see Paris has too much bend in the neck and not bending through the shoulders and back. There is only 2 tracks and the shoulders in is not being performed. After Anne Wilson's recommendations of mixing up the exercise when difficulties occur, Paris performed much better. Goodwin et al. 2009 states advances in training are seen when the horse is interrupted, then returns back to its work. Again, Paris performed shoulder in with too much neck flexion. However, his hind end movement improved, keeping him straight. However, too many steps were asked of him for the first ridden session. Because of the rider's mistake, Paris's shoulders and hind end fall in, and the praise was rewarded too late, after the desired movements were performed. Due to windy conditions, Paris was unoccupied on the training session. Different exercises were incorporated around the shoulder ends to keep Paris focused on each activity asked of him. Teacher and rider Bernard Criss states that when the incorrect movement is ridden, or when the movement begins to go wrong, a circle should be used to apply the horse's bend and try the move again. This method was therefore incorporated into session 4. Throughout this session, Paris was reluctant to bend through the shoulders and the hindquarters began to follow in their positioning. Overall, the training session had progressed backwards, and the training plan's aim to build up the steps of shoulder end seen was only hindering when the move was performed correctly. After a better of session 4's shoulder in was performed, the session was stopped to prevent knocking of the confidence to horse or rider. Warren et al. 2007 says this is detrimental to a training program. Following Session 4's setback, groundwork was reincorporated beginning with session to restore confidence to the horse and rider, improve obedience, and remind Paris of the movement and aids being asked. A long warm-up was also used, using serpentines and circles to encourage bend, which had lacked in the previous sessions. Paris had made huge improvements throughout Session 5. On the right rein, overbending of the neck reduced, and more steps could be added to the movement. Although the hind end still comes in off the track, Paris is consistently on 3 tracks and bent through his shoulder. It is apparent that the left rein still requires work, as falling in and lack of bend is seen. Grand Prix dressage rider Jody Hartstone reassures that one rein will always be easier for the horse, and more practice will be required on the opposite rein. Shively et al. 2016 showed research concluding that horses have a preferred side, similar to how humans are right or left-handed. Matt Hicks uses shoulders in on a diagonal line as a suppling exercise, as less angle is needed. Supporting removal of the outside track, Horse and Hound in 2017 recommends using the 3/4 line to encourage the horse to listen to the aids of the rider and not relying on the fence next to them. Using this method, Paris's left shoulder in improved. A long warm-up was carried into each session. Clayton et al. 2010 recommends a longer time spent warming the muscles using bending exercises and lateral work for horses with epaxal muscle tension, such as Paris along the thoracolumbar spine. During Session 6, Paris was consistent on 3 tracks, bending through the shoulders, more steps were added to the movement, and Paris only on occasion fell out through the quarters. Session 6 spent more time on the left and weaker rein. More circling on this rein encourages a left bend, which helps out the shoulder-in movement. Although there was not as much consistency to this rein, improvements were made. Although Paris was not at the desired level of consistent shoulders in down the straight side of the school, the movement shoulders in has been taught. This will be used within training as a suppling exercise and help Paris's muscles to relax. Further training on the left rein in particular will be carried out before trot is introduced. To aid in future training, mirrors within the school will better show the rider if the movement is carried out correctly. This or an experienced rider who can view the training activity whilst it is being performed. More prompt awards could have been given throughout the training program, as Goodwin et al. 2009 states training relies on timing and consistency. However, Auditory rewards given cannot be reviewed due to windy weather conditions throughout the training program.